Welcome to the Manager Matt podcast show. The show is designed to give you solutions to your day-to-day management and leadership problems. It's hosted by Matthew Haddock, a frontline manager and leader with over 25 years of experience. If you're ready, then let's get on with the show.
Welcome to the Manager Matt podcast show. This week, I want to talk about how you need people to have your back. Getting people on your side, and loyalty runs both ways. Right, without any more delay, let's get on with this week's show. Welcome to the Manager Matt podcast show. I hope you are doing well, and I'm hoping you are succeeding in everything you do, both inside and outside of work. This week's show, we're going to talk about how you need people to have your back at work as a manager. I'm going to see how you need to have a think around the leadership of your team, how you take your team from where it is to where it's going, and how it can really go wrong if you don't get that loyalty. And of course, as I said on the intro, the loyalty runs both ways. But let's start right at the beginning. Always the best place to start. That everything you do as a leader and a manager is going to need people to do it. You cannot do it on your own. Leaders without a team, they are nothing, and they are bound to fail. The team makes a leader, and the leader makes the team. That's the distinction. There's no such thing as a lone wolf when it comes to management and leadership of people. This idea of a lone wolf, this very romanticised, I can do it all myself. I'm a bit of a maverick out there. I can make this team tick without me. You see it on sports fields, you see it in business, and it doesn't work. Usually the lone wolf is doomed, and it's usually the lone wolf that gets booted out of the pack. So you need the people to have your back. You need the team to understand what you're trying to do for them and what they need to do for you. Now, there is the fact that the team wins together. And the only way you can get results, which is what this is all about, remember, management is about getting results. The only way you can get results is to make sure that your team is winning and you show the team that you're there for them to win. The problem that does arise in every business that I've been involved in is that you can, unfortunately, especially depending on how you enter into a business and where you come from, be doomed to fail from the start because the team doesn't really bond. The team doesn't get you and you don't get them. So it soon works to the detriment of your career and what you're trying to do because a team just doesn't really want you there. And that is a big thing. They can soon be the kingmakers. And I think we sometimes forget that. We sometimes forget that the people who are actually around us, our direct reports, our peers, definitely our boss, make those ultimate decisions. We always think, yeah, of course, if I don't fit into the team, the peer team, my other managers, if I don't get the boss to be aware of what I can add, that I'm soon going to go down the road. What we overlook is the fact that the team itself can and has in the past, for myself as well, be the thing that can mean that you don't succeed. You can very much become stuck in the middle between your boss above and your team below. So it's really important that we start to get these things right from day one. As I said, no person can do everything themselves. You need the team, and if you're losing from day one, sometimes you even won't make your probation. So it's definitely worth thinking of, looking at getting a business to really tick. It starts from the beginning. It starts actually before the beginning. If you're going to be in a position of recruiting as a recruiting manager, you don't need to be looking at how the person who's coming in is going to fit in, not just to you, and not in regards to birds of a feather flock together, making sure that they're not all the same people, but actually making sure that that person you're taking on board is going to fit to the group and the culture that's there. Now, we all want to think that we bring people in, and I've recruited a lot of people over my time. You want to think you're bringing someone in with something different. You don't want a clone of the past. You don't want an exact copy. You want someone who's going to come in, have a fresh pair of eyes, have a new impetus that's going to add energy, it's going to add a data element, it's going to add a skill element. And of course, that's great. You want that. If you don't, you end up stagnating. You get the same people. And that's what you find when you promote people internally. And there's nothing wrong with promoting internally, don't get me wrong, but you're promoting the people internally who have a very similar mindset that's been there for years. So if you're really wanting to bring in somebody different, you're obviously going to have to try to bring in somebody new. Let's look at the other side of that though. If they are too much different, if they are too far away from the norms, and I'm not talking from a diversity point of view or anything like that, then the team itself or the culture itself will not actually embrace and what will happen is you will not embed that person. They'll be like an organ. You bring the organ in and you think it's the best thing, but actually gets rejected by the team that need to make it work. So you've got to start from the recruitment manager's point of view and say, what do we need? Not just from a skills, not just from a personality, but from a cultural fit. What do we need? No, the ground work needs to start. You need to get the group prep. Do you really know what the role is going to be for that person when they come in? What are you expecting them to do that's going to add value for your business? And then if you do really good interviewing, you're trying to get to that. You're looking at in an interview process, do they have the skills to do the job? Tick. Do they have the motivation to do that job? Do they have the real drive? Yeah, maybe tick. But the last one, and the one that we do overlook a lot in interviewing, do they fit to the business and team's culture? Now, you can all be shouting at the podcast now and saying, well, we can change the culture. And yeah, of course, cultural change is a big part of what leaders do. But it's not easy. It's not something that you can do overnight. So if you're bringing in a position and you're recruiting that, at that interview stage, will they fit to the current culture? Or maybe put it differently, can they fit to that culture enough to get loyalty, to get people on your side or on their side? I know that bringing somebody in who's new is difficult, so get that interviewing right. And then, of course, making sure that when you get into the onboarding stage, what are we expecting for that person to do in the first few months of coming on board? You know, you need them to understand the business, of course. You need to get the KPIs, you need to understand the customers and what they're meant to deliver. But bigger than that, they need to know what the wins and losses are for the new position. What are the small sort of cultural pieces that person's going to have to do? Who should they be meeting? Who should they be talking to? Who should they be getting to know in those first few weeks to get on board? And if you're a good hiring manager, you talk to the person you've hired. Of course you do. You've got get one-to-ones in. Obviously, I'm not going to say anything else. You get your good one-to-ones in. You get your feedback in there. You talk to them about it. But you also have one-to-ones with the people who are directly managed. And you get the feel. Now, it can be difficult because, especially if, and I've entered businesses where I've got the job above people. You know, I've got that role above the ones who are there. And that is difficult because there's loyalty in there. There's loyalty that the candidate who didn't get the job. There's loyalty, especially if the candidate's still there, to that person. So you've got to try and win that over straight away. And, you know, I've won some of the battles in that, and I've lost a couple of those battles where the dressing room has been lost, and unfortunately, I've had to leave the business. But on the reverse, I've got people on my side. I've got people understanding what the business wanted. I've pushed forward, and they could see the value. And through good one-to-ones, through structure of what I expected them to be delivered, through positive feedback and sometimes corrective feedback, I've got the people where they needed to be to push forward. I said at the start, loyalty works both ways. You know, there's certain things you need to do as a manager in those positions because you really do need to make sure that you're doing everything you can to not get rejected. I know it does sound crazy, get rejected. You're thinking old school, you get a manager in, they're the boss, they've got the power. And of course, there is a bit of power. But when you're first starting, you don't have much power. You're trying to build a lot of relationships. So, you know, you've got to make sure that from the person who's hired, so I'm thinking, I've come into a business now, what do I need to do to get loyalty to run both ways? You know, people don't choose to be loyal to you. You know, either they'll feel it or they don't. But there's certain things you can try to do. You can make sure you don't gossip behind people's backs. Don't pass on any rumours you hear. Be professional, is that one. You know, stand up for them. Stand up for the team. Make sure that they understand that you are doing everything you can for that team. And I've done that. Whenever I go into a business, I look at it and think, how can I help the people here improve? And that's not an arrogant thing. How can I use my influence, my knowledge, my skills the information I've gleaned over years to make them better. Sometimes they embrace that and it's brilliant. I can remember a couple of companies where they've embraced it, saving millions just from looking things different. And there's others that haven't embraced that. They've decided to fight their way through, and I've left those businesses because that culture wasn't right for me. It wasn't going to work. But you stand up for them. You always think, can I make sure I'm saving jobs? Can I make sure I'm pushing this business forward? I don't want to be seen as the person who comes in and makes huge change just for change's sake. I want to make sure it's the right thing. You've got to show support and sympathy for the people, and that's what I do through my one-to-ones. Understand them, make sure they understand where I'm coming from. You mustn't betray the confidence, especially in those first few months. Because, if you'll get a cooperation of your team, it'll make a big difference. But if you start to betray them straight away, wow, they're just going to turn. And they gossip behind your back. Don't kid yourself. They're in a circle so much stronger than you. You're the guy sat on your own in the canteen. You're the guy sat out on the park bench having your dinner on your own because you don't know the people. You haven't got that contact. They've got it. They've got the in-jokes that have been there. And you understand that. You think, okay, fair enough. They've got the friendships that are there. They've built. And if they give you time, you'll build them as well. I always try to treat people's opinions with respect. I'm not going to disguise the fact that I think they're wrong. I'll tell them, but I want their voice to be viewed. I want to make sure that I can understand what they're coming from and their passions. So listening to them and then, with their passions, get their ideas on that table, make sure the projects are built. A lot of the time when I've gone into businesses, especially once I've been working for myself and doing some consultancy stuff, the ideas are already there. It's the old allergy about a consultant or if someone who comes in to do some sort of interim stuff, borrows the watch and tells you the time. That sometimes is the case. But you tell the time so much better. You design it in a way that allows people to take their passion and their views and puts it into something that makes it work. And that's the skill you can deliver as a leader. You've got the project management skills. You've got the communication skills that others might not have. That doesn't mean you take the credit. You just say, this was X person idea, and I think it'll run if we do this, that, and other. Showing you care for the individuals is a massive thing to get loyalty to run in both directions. I hope I do that. I do hope I do that. And a lot of the feedback I get, either good or bad, is around the fact that I do care. I'm a caring, and sometimes that can bite me. I can be too caring. I can open up maybe too much. But I don't want to change what I am because I think it gets results. I like to remember the hobbies and the things that people do outside of work. I like to know the kids or the family situations which we build through our one-to-ones. That means they get loyalty. They start asking me the questions. I remember I did a one-to-one with a colleague at companies a few times back, and actually at the end of it when we talked about the family and what they did and what their aspirations, what the team were, turned around and went, well, what's your family like? What do you do? And I was a bit taken back because it probably wasn't the first time somebody actually asked me that. But you've got to appreciate, as the boss, sometimes don't see that side of you. And it's good to share, it's good to be open, it's good to have the fact that you can have empathy for them both ways. You be appreciative that sometimes you're going to get it wrong, sometimes they're going to get it wrong, and sometimes there's going to be a fact that that's how it works. But you roll together, you get loyalty by taking the blame as the manager, if you want to call it that, taking the responsibility and the accountability and driving it forward. And of course, to get trust both ways, it's not all about give. You don't expect them to be there weekends, you don't expect them to be doing extra hours every day, but when you do, when you get those days, you want to be able to call on them and have that loyalty for them to say, yep, I'll be there, I can do that for you, not a problem, I'll be there. And on the reverse, sometimes you need to say to them, get yourself off, that'll do. You've had a good day, why don't you go get some lunch or go get dinner with your family? I know it's appreciated. Or go to that training session that your son's having, or go to the school meeting, and that makes you genuine, and they get that loyalty hopefully both ways from that. It all builds your team. The more you show genuine interest with people and engage in a conversation that's outside the transactional, the more likely they are to be loyal and remember what you're doing. Now, we're not talking loyal, throw yourself under a bus, but if we're looking at building teams that need you there and want you there, because like I said, there's a fact that sometimes you can soon go down a rabbit hole of being lost in that business. You need the people to have your back, because when it goes to the next meeting with the boss and they discuss and they go, how's it going? How's that new leader doing? How's that new manager doing? You want them to turn around and go, actually, he's a top guy. He always cares. He always asks me about it. You know, he doesn't impose himself on me, but he makes tough decisions when he needs to. I like him around. He knows that when we win together, but when we lose together. I think he's a good asset. That's what you want him to say to your boss. If not, then obviously you're going to be on a bit of a back foot, because that boss is going to be listening, if he's any good to both sides. He'll be listening to your side as the hire or the new leader, but he's going to be listening to them, and he's going to be looking at what can he glean from those conversations. That means that, you know, are we getting both sides? Are we getting the best out of that person? And are they actually making sure they're driving the business forward and delivering results? And of course, you know, and I know that a bad hire can make a good team a bad team, but a great hire can change a good team to a great team. Well, it'd be great to hear your thoughts on the show this week. So if you do have any thoughts on this show or other shows, or how you've turned teams around, please send it to managermattpodcast@gmail.com. I read all the emails, and I do honestly answer. If I haven't answered straight away and it's got lost in whatever filters, send it again. It's pressing a button. Doesn't take much, and give you a shout out on the show. Well, that's it for Manager Matt this week. Thank you so much for listening, and goodbye.
Thank you so much for listening to this Manager Matt podcast. We hope you found it interesting, helpful and actionable. One last thing, please leave a quick review on iTunes or with your podcast provider, as it helps to spread the word of Manager Matt. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the podcast, and if you did like anything in particular, send an email to managermattpodcast@gmail.com or visit managermatt.co.uk for more content. Feedback is a gift, so let's keep giving. See you next week.